He orchestrated the deadliest terror attack in modern history and then disappeared. After 9/11, Osama bin Laden became the world's most wanted man, with intelligence agencies scouring the globe. For nearly a decade, he stayed hidden in plain sight, not in some remote mountain, but inside a compound just miles from Pakistan's top military academy. So what was life like behind those walls? Find out on today's episode of The Infographic Show as we explore bin Laden's secret life in total isolation. When the war in Afghanistan began, Osama bin Laden vanished into the mountains, determined to stay one step ahead of the U.S. forces. He had already made the FBI's top 10 most wanted list back in 1999, but after orchestrating the 9/11 attacks, he knew the hunt for him would be relentless, and it nearly ended just 3 months later. In December 2001, U.S. forces cornered him at Tora Bora, a rugged stretch of mountains in eastern Afghanistan. It should have been the end, but somehow bin Laden escaped. The United States would spend almost an entire decade on the hunt for him, searching across 27 different countries, spending what amounted to billions of dollars, only to end up finding him in a 3-story structure on a dirt road 3/4 of a mile southwest of Abbottabad, Pakistan. From the outside, the building was surrounded by concrete walls, ranging from 12 to 18 feet tall, with coils of barbed wire at the top. Even with that somewhat menacing home security measure, there wasn't a whole lot that set the house apart from the others in the neighborhood. Many of the nearby houses in the area of Bilal town had barbed wire surrounding their properties. The biggest difference was really the plot of land the house was located on, much larger than those of the nearby houses. The compound wasn't just a single main building, but also the surrounding area that formed a triangular shape. There were a number of smaller buildings, 2 security gates to keep unwanted visitors out, and even a designated space outside for burning trash. All the amenities of a modern bachelor pad. Thanks to the high walls, it was pretty hard to get a look at what was going on inside or see which infamous terrorist was living there. There weren't that many windows either, and any that weren't obscured by walls were kept opaque, especially the ones facing north. Meanwhile, the 3rd-floor balcony was completely walled off by a 7-foot-tall privacy wall. Local residents would come to know the home as Waziristan Haveli, referring to the mountainous Waziristan region of Pakistan, and Haveli meaning mansion, either because it was just a big house or possibly because bin Laden himself had previously spent time in that area of Pakistan. The plot itself was also owned by a transporter from Waziristan, Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. Kuwaiti had purchased the vacant lot in 2004 and then the 4 adjoining lots the following year, all for the equivalent of $48,000. Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti plays a much bigger role in the story than just being the owner of the land that the compound was located on, and bin Laden didn't spend his entire time in hiding at this one location either. But we'll get on both of those details in a moment. First, let's continue with the grand tour. The main building of the compound was the house that bin Laden called home after its construction in 2005 until his death in 2011. Initially, it was a 2-story structure with the ground floor divided up into 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a kitchen, and a storage room. Above the first floor consisted of another 4 bathrooms and 4 more bedrooms. The very top of the house was actually built as an addition to the house after its originally planned 2 floors were complete, and this extra floor was added illegally. In October 2005, northeast Pakistan was hit by a pretty huge earthquake, with Abbottabad feeling the worst of its effects. Under the guise of repairing the house, an unauthorized structure was added to the top of the house, becoming the main bedroom, where bin Laden himself lived. When you perpetrate one of the deadliest acts of terror in history, you're not going to be concerned about local zoning laws. As for the furnishings, well, it's hardly what you would call luxury, which is probably why the Waziristan Haveli was never featured on MTV Cribs. On the upper 2 floors where bin Laden and his family lived, there were only cheap foam mattresses for the al-Qaeda leader and his wives to sleep on, plus no air conditioning throughout the whole house, only central heating. On top of that, there were no phones, so that bin Laden could avoid potential surveillance. Most of his communication with al-Qaeda and the rest of the outside world relied entirely on human couriers, something that would prove to be bin Laden's own undoing. One of the rooms on the first floor was found furnished with a whiteboard along with markers and textbooks. This indicated that it probably doubled as a classroom for the children of the house who were homeschooled in Arabic. That's right, this wasn't just a terrorist mastermind lair, it was a family home too. And not just one either. Several families lived there, including the wives of bin Laden and his aide's spouses, as well as their children and bin Laden's 2 daughters who were both adults in their early 20s. Additionally, there were thought to be a number of domestic helpers employed by bin Laden's family living on site at the compound. 2 women believed to have been maids received medical treatment after the fateful raid in May 2011. But as far as anyone in the nearby Balal town area knew, the inhabitants of Waziristan Haveli were two mysterious brothers named Tariq Khan and Arshad Khan. In reality, they were Abrar al-Kuwaiti and his brother Ibrahim, both of bin Laden's aides. These two had little contact with their neighbors, choosing to keep themselves isolated in order to conceal their true identities. The brothers ensured that everyone inside the compound both had everything they needed, but also never left its walls. Any of the neighbors that interacted with the Khans found them to be polite enough. They'd never initiate conversations, but would exchange brief greetings when given a casual salam alaikum. But everyone agreed that these two brothers had an air of menace about them too. Some residents in the area believed the Khan brothers were landlords who had moved to Abbottabad from Charsara, an area in northwestern Pakistan. But it was clear from the high walls and the barbed wire that whoever those brothers really were, they didn't want anyone snooping on them. So most people just left them alone. Nobody living in the house was permitted to mix with the locals, and most of them were rarely seen, if ever, at local community events and celebrations. One of the neighbors claimed that on one occasion, a group of local children managed to accidentally bat a cricket ball over the 18-foot wall into the compound, and unsurprisingly, they wouldn't get their ball back. Rumors began to spread about the two brothers that lived at Waziristan Haveli, with some neighbors believing that they were smugglers with all sorts of ill-gotten gains stashed in the house, like gold, weapons, and cash. What was actually inside, though, might well have been even stranger, but it sure gives a lot of insight into how bin Laden might have spent some of that time in hiding. Time to talk about video games, TV shows, and, well, other content that bin Laden might have watched. There were around 183 separate devices that could store computer files located in the Abbottabad compound, including game consoles as well as other digital storage devices. There were as many as 20 people living there too, so not all of what was found on these devices may have belonged to bin Laden. Keeping all that in mind, almost 470,000 files were recovered by Navy SEALs during their raid of the compound, the contents of which were later released to the public by the CIA. There were diaries of bin Laden's movements, his thoughts about the state of al-Qaeda, and even a 19-page report about their links to Iran. Alongside videos of beheadings, there was also footage of bin Laden's son Hamza at his wedding. Bin Laden even had copies of those US-made documentaries about himself, like CNN's In the Footsteps of Bin Laden, and those weren't even the strangest things he might have watched. Among the cache of computer files released by the CIA were pirated online content including cat videos, wildlife documentaries, one video called Horse Dance, and a copy of infamous early viral YouTube clip Charlie Bit My Finger. And then there were several animated films including Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs and Ants, as well as an episode of Mr. Bean and several Jackie Chan adventures, Tom and Jerry, and Case Closed. Sure, these were all more likely watched by the younger residents of the house, but come on, you have to wonder if Osama bin Laden enjoyed kicking back and putting his feet up while watching Ice Age. And then again, other files found at the compound seem to suggest he had some other extra vocational hobbies. Several copies of other video games were also found in the compound, namely Final Fantasy VII, Devil May Cry, Counter-Strike, Half-Life, and Resident Evil. A game guide for Delta Force Extreme 2 was also found, though it's unclear if any copies of this 2009 first-person shooter were ever discovered there. It's also widely believed that a compound resident other than bin Laden probably used this game guide, and even if they did own a copy, it's not like they would have enjoyed Delta Force Extreme 2. Not only were its AI and graphics outdated even for 2009, but its multiplayer component would have been inaccessible, since there were no internet cables or phone lines running into the house. Now, life on the run sounds bad enough. Life on the run spent in the same building with no internet and no contact to the outside world? Even worse. He was evading a global manhunt by highly sophisticated intelligence agencies and imposed strict limitations on himself when it came to interacting with the outside world. He never used cell phones or landlines, only communicated through files on flash drives that his couriers would then send out from internet cafes. While to us the idea of life like this sounds pretty mundane, it's important to remember that bin Laden and everyone else at the compound wasn't oblivious to the ongoing worldwide search for his hiding place. Every day they would have lived with the sheer dread and tension of wondering, is today the day we get caught? That cricket ball hit over the wall by the neighborhood kids could well have been a grenade from US military forces about to storm Waziristan Haveli. Life had to be strictly regimented for everyone that lived in the compound, with most of them straight up not allowed to leave. This mainly applied to bin Laden's wives and the Khan brothers' wives. The only ones allowed regular movement were Tariq and Arshad Khan, who were tasked with shopping for food, as well as being bin Laden's trusted couriers. Neighbors would report seeing the two men frequenting local shops, usually buying what looked like enough food to feed a dozen people. According to eyewitnesses, the cons would only pick up the best brands they could get their hands on, from high-quality soaps and shampoos to Nestle-branded milk and even sodas like Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Though life at the Waziristan Haveli wasn't all bathing like a king and chugging sugary drinks, in fact, most of the food recovered there after it was raided was pretty basic. Dried meats and fruits like dates, nuts and eggs, olive oil, and bread that was occasionally bought from a local bakery. On the few occasions that the children of the compound were brought out alongside the brothers, they'd be bought plenty of sweets and soft drinks. A local shopkeeper named Muhammad Rashid recounted seeing the cons and some boys from the compound in his corner shop buying sweets, but these were only ever Tariq and Arshad's children. The two brothers homeschooled their kids, but they were the only ones permitted to leave the compound from time to time. On a few occasions, they even got to play cricket with the other local kids, but nobody ever saw any of the girls or any of bin Laden's or the cons' wives. The women of the bin Laden family and both couriers' wives were made to live in total seclusion, with the female children observing the veil from as young as 3 years old. It's not like the cons did all the important jobs either. Back at the compound, someone had to rear the numerous animals that were raised on the grounds, including rabbits, a cow, and around 100 chickens. There was also a well-kept vegetable garden near the back of the main house, which was maintained by a local farmer by the name of Shamriaz. He was paid twice a year to plant new vegetables after the previous crop had been harvested and eaten. And it seems that Shamriaz either wasn't foolish enough to let his curiosity get the better of him, or he was paid handsomely enough to not even think about asking questions. Shamriaz never set foot in the building, having no clue that Osama bin Laden was hiding inside the house the whole time. So when Shamriaz wasn't around, who was gardening? Well, bin Laden's kids were. As well as overseeing the religious education of the compound's children, he was also personally in charge of supervising their playtime. And like a true diabolical mastermind, he figured out a way to make chores into a game. He encouraged the kids to cultivate the vegetables in the compound's garden and offered prizes for whoever tended the plants the best. Also located adjacent to the grounds was a grazing area that typically played host to cows and buffalo, and were looked after by Khalid, bin Laden's son. He was also responsible for plumbing and other maintenance jobs inside the house, which is why Shamriaz was never asked to do any odd jobs apart from those in the garden. Goats were also delivered to the compound, as well as 21 pints of milk per day. A farmer's field also surrounded the compound on 3 sides, growing cabbage and potatoes, though vegetables and livestock weren't the only things grown on site either. On the far side of the compound were wild cannabis plants. And while there's no confirmation bin Laden liked to light up a few after a long day, there is no doubt that it would have eased the tension of being hunted by U.S. intelligence. Life inside the house itself was as frugal as it was secluded, with no room for extravagant expenses or even an abundance of basic necessities like clothes. When he arrived in Abbottabad, bin Laden owned 6 pairs of shalwar kameez, a type of local Pakistani dress, 3 for summer and 3 for winter, as well as 1 black jacket and a couple of sweaters. He also owned a cowboy hat, which he wore whenever he moved around outside on the compound. He thought that this would help conceal his identity from any U.S. drones or satellites that might observe the compound from above. Paranoia wasn't the only ailment bin Laden had to contend with while living on the compound either. Between moving to Abbottabad in 2005 to 2011, bin Laden began experiencing sluggishness and fatigue, which he initially tried to combat by eating apples or chocolate to give himself a boost of energy. As time went on, though, he began developing health complications, particularly issues affecting his kidneys and heart. Despite this, though, he never received any medical attention, no doctors ever visited the compound, nor did bin Laden ever leave. He couldn't risk being treated by someone who might recognize him and spill the secrets of his whereabouts. Testimony from bin Laden's wives gives us a pretty good idea of what day-to-day life was really like inside the compound. But what about the house in Abbottabad? How do we know about its illegal third story? Well, the original plans showed the property was owned by one of the 2 brothers, the one who went by the name of Arshad Khan, or as we know him, Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, the same man who had originally bought the land where the compound was built. He wasn't just the owner and one of the other couriers delivering messages to and from the compound for bin Laden. Al-Kuwaiti is also the person who led the U.S. to where OBL was hiding. American intelligence officials had supposedly identified Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti as early as 2002 and were fully aware that he owned the compound that housed bin Laden. It was just a matter of tracking him down. However, because bin Laden had demanded that there be no phone lines, internet cables, or cell phones anywhere in his hiding place, getting any trial on al-Kuwaiti was proving difficult. That is, until intelligence was collected from al-Qaeda detainees being held at Guantanamo Bay that revealed Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti also went by the pseudonym of Arshad Khan. Discovering this was the name linked to the compound in Abbottabad, CIA paramilitary operatives tracked al-Kuwaiti to the location in August of 2010, leading to the US speculating this could be where bin Laden was holed up. And as it turns out, it certainly was. For almost an entire decade, while the intelligence community and especially the United States was searching the globe for him, Osama bin Laden was hidden in a compound that remained cut off from the world, living under constant tension and the fear of being discovered at any moment, frozen in time with little glimpses of the outside world, all to be ultimately inadvertently undone by one of the very aides responsible for securing this Abbottabad sanctuary. Who knows? Bin Laden probably wasn't expecting SEAL Team 6 to kick down his door that fateful day in May of 2011. But at least it was a change from his usual routine. Not that he got to live to appreciate that. You've seen how he lived and now see how it all ended. Don't miss our next episode, how SEAL Team took down Osama bin Laden minute by minute, or click on this video instead.